Evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 9th, 2024 meeting of the Yolo Transportation District Board of Directors. Let the record reflect it's 6:02 p.m. To my left, I have Director Stoller, Director Lauren, and Director Dolzich, who is over here to my right. We are expecting Director Early here shortly, and Director Frericks will be absent this evening. So we have a quorum. There are three of us here, so we are going to start our meeting. With that, I will turn to my colleagues and entertain a motion to approve our agenda.
So moved.
So seconded.
We have a motion by Director Stoller and a second by Director Lauren. Any further comments on the agenda? Director Lauren?
I do have a comment. I have a clarifying question for 4D, and if it's, I support the item, but I do have a clarifying question. I don't know that it needs to be taken off if it's just a clarifying question.
Yeah, I think do you want me to, we'll approve the agenda, then we'll get the motion to approve consent,
Yes.
and then we'll do that then.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. So we have a motion on the table by Director Stoller, and a second by Director Warren. Any further conversation? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstain. Motion carries 3-0. We have an agenda. We are now on to agenda item number, agenda item number 3, which is general public comment. Meant for any item that is not on our agenda or an item that is on consent calendar, or if you can't stay for a regular calendar item, you may use your time now. Do we have any in-person general public comment? Well,
I'm concerned that the public record doesn't reflect the public's input. That letters and comments received from the public are not included in the official records of the meeting. I know they can be obtained by a public records request, but you don't know they're even existing before you can obtain them. They should be included in the minutes, and anything that's given to the regarding an agenda item should be included in the agenda packet or in the minutes of the meeting. If you really want to be transparent, if you really want to reflect public input, public input should be recorded and part of the official record. Thank you very much.
thank you, Alan. Welcome.
Yes.
Good evening, Chair Chapman and members of the board. Michael Barnbaum, Public Transportation Advocacy and Consulting, and in Sacramento County. Just want the record to reflect on this section of the agenda that I'm providing the board. Madam Clerk, a receive and file oral report from the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Board meeting of November 2024. There were 2 meat and potatoes items on the board agenda. And thanks to our friend in Citrus Heights who reported earlier tonight at another board meeting, Tim Schaefer. I'm reminded to remind the board that the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Board at its November meeting approved another 5-year administrative services agreement with the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit District to administer, market, and provide the Capital Corridor Administrative Services program through, again, the next 5 years. And the other item was the South Bay Connect Environmental Impact Report. The environmental impact report was approved. There was a lot of public comment from people at the meeting and remotely from Hayward that were not very happy about what was happening. And Managing Director Padgett will be making a presentation to the Hayward City Council about the recently adopted environmental impact report from his board meeting that occurred again in November. Those are pretty much the items. There were no items discussed about service levels, but I will note for the record, this Friday, I will have a call with Deputy Managing Director Leo Sanchez about the restoration of service post-COVID. Hopefully that will happen this upcoming calendar year and discussed at the next board meeting, which will happen on Wednesday, February 19th at the BART boardroom at 2150 Webster Street in Oakland, California. With that, Madam Clerk and Mr. Chairman, I've concluded my report. Would you like anything to add after this conclusion? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have any other in-person general public comment? Do we have any online public comment?
No public comment online.
All right, thank you. So we'll close, general public comment, and we will now move to agenda item 4, which is our consent calendar. And I'll turn to Director Warren.
All right, I have some questions on item. I got the microphone on. I have some questions on item 4D, on page 24, it, talks about Beeline. It says the microtransit Beeline budget reflects a 64% increase over the prior year due to expanded service hours and vehicles for Woodland Winters, Knights Landing and Yolo. I understand the 64%, but I was wondering if you could break it down to the jurisdictions.
Good evening. How are you? Okay, yeah, so the 64% increase in microtransit was part of the adopted budget. For Woodland, we had an increase of 51% as compared to the prior year.
Okay.
And then Winters was about 120% compared to the prior. And then for Knights Landing, it was 124%. So change for Winters specifically in dollars was 218,000.
And do you have for Woodland and?
Okay, for Woodland, it was 325,000 and Knights Landing, 180,000.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chaz.
Just to follow up, I am pretty sure, but I want to make sure that I'm remembering correctly, because I'm honestly going off my memory, that not only was that approved in the budget, but those breakouts were also, because I remember these percentages,
We do have
by
the
just, yep,
Yep.
you do.
The tables are in the budget book. It's kind of buried in there, but it does show what we budgeted in the prior year. It also, actually, it's a new table. We didn't have it in the prior
Remember, we
year.
discussed it.
Yeah, we created that for this year's budget. And then,
Page 29.
oh, there's another one in the budget.
Yeah, in the actual-
Please show
yeah,
the
in the
number of
budget.
vehicles, assigned to the jurisdiction, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any further questions on our consent calendar? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Early moves.
I will second.
All right, we have a motion by Director Early. Oh, yeah, I didn't do public comment, did I?
But
General comment,
usually
We already-
our
Which I
general
said,
public
yeah.
comment is
Yeah.
supposed to capture the consent.
which I mentioned
as
on
well,
that.
so
Yeah,
let's
yes,
do it.
I already said it, yeah.
You did it.
Yep. Okay, so we have a motion by Director Early. Was it Director Warren?
Uh-huh.
Second by Director Warren. Any further questions, comments on our consent calendar? Not seeing any, all in favor, please say aye.
I
Opposed, abstained, motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
I believe it's 4.
4-0. So you said
Director
4,
Ferris
5,
absent.
yeah,
Mm.
4-0. Thank you. Okay. We are now on to our regular calendar for this evening, which is agenda item number 5, which is the appointment of the chair and vice chair for 2025. Director Bernstein.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So for this evening, as was suggested at the last board meeting, we decided to move this up and do it in December so that we would have a clean transition, if you will, between this meeting and the next. Want to thank Chair Chapman for his service over this past year. And the staff recommendation is that we do transition to a new chair following our rotation. So based on our rotation, the chair next year would be Director Early representing West Sacramento, and our vice chair would be Director Lauren representing Winters.
Mr. Chair, I'm pleased to make a motion to affirm those decisions.
Okay, I'm gonna make sure we have no public comment or open public comment first, and then go from there. Do we have any in-person public comment on agenda item number 5? Sure.
Yeah,
Welcome.
congratulatory comment. So again, looking back at November, as I said at last week's swearing in ceremony at 1110 West Capitol Avenue, congratulations to all the winners. And congratulations here to members Early and Lauren for your appointment to chair and vice chair. And I would say if there was a lyric or a song to this, I would say, "This is ladies' night, oh what a night." Congratulations.
Thank you, Michael.
Wait a minute, I think it gets this.
Impressive. Yeah. Any more in-person public comment? Yeah, do we have any online?
No public comments online.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Director Stollard to for Director Early to be our next chair and Director Warren to be the vice chair in 2025. Is there a second? I will second that motion. And before I call on our vote, I just also want to recognize Director Stollard, who has been a stalwart here on this board for a long time. It's also his last meeting. It's been, for me personally, a pleasure and an honor to work with you. The historical knowledge, information that you have, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from you. My first few years, I was on the SACOG board with you as well. And it's always a pleasure to sit back and hear your insight and your thoughts. I don't know, in my 4 years of being an elected official, I've come across somebody who was more passionate and caring for the city they represent than you. So it's been a pleasure to work with you, Director Stollard.
Very kind of you to say those things. Thank you so much. You are all dear friends and I will miss you working with you. But we'll get back together, never know when.
Yeah, right. Director Early.
So this is the second time that I am saying goodbye to getting to work with you. The first was on SACOG, and I remember I had the opportunity to really be mentored and counseled by you, not as long as I would have personally liked. And so I've appreciated this past, I don't know if it's been a year or 2 years, they've just blended together quite frankly. But I am gonna miss you. I was sad to hear that you were going to be transitioning off. I will still be calling you, so you can't get rid of me. And I appreciate all of your patience and kindness and knowledge and your continued willingness to share. It really has been helpful for me as a new member, not only to this board, but just as a new council member, to have you and your willingness to pass the torch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Warren.
I would like to go back to Josh's words on how you serve your community. You are one of the most dedicated servants I've ever worked with, and I really appreciate that you ask tough questions and that you continue down that road until you are satisfied with an answer. It's a great example of leadership for all of us, and I'm really happy to work with you. Still on Valley Clean Energy, right?
Right.
Okay, so we'll still be working together. But
See you Thursday.
see you Thursday, but I'll miss you. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Bless you all.
Thanks. All right, any
Yeah.
dosage?
I'll just round this out and say thank you, Tom, for all of the great work and mentoring here on this board. It's always so great to have your positive contributions and guiding us to smart decisions. So thank you for that. And of course, as a longtime friend of UC Davis, it's great to know that you're still around and guiding and helping us on many of our campus projects. So thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't imagine serving on this board without you and when I knew you were leaving.
I gotta get out. Going downhill after that. That's obviously gonna be true.
One more meeting.
All right, so we have a motion by Director Stollard and a second by myself. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion carries 4-0. Thank you, congratulations. All right, on to agenda item number 6, approve resolution 2024-29 and 2024-30, evaluating Woodland Transit Center Gateway Shopping Center option, affirming intent Department of Yolo County Housing Authority on grant application for Yolo, Yolo Donnelly Housing Site. That's a long title for an agenda item. It's a lot in there. We're gonna turn to, looks like, Brian Abner, welcome.
And I'm actually gonna start. I won the contest for who could come up with the longest title for the agenda item, so that means I get to start. But thank you very much. And I appreciate our attorney to make sure that we are always compliant with the Brown Act in our titles. So we all deserve credit for this one. But with that, I'm gonna go ahead and start us off, and then I'm gonna hand it over to Brian. And I also just want to acknowledge that we have Ian Evans from Yolo County Housing Authority, as well as, of course, Ken Hyatt, who needs no introduction, Ken Hyatt from the City of Woodlands, who have graciously agreed to be here and spend their evening with us. So after our presentation, I'm gonna invite them both to give a few remarks before we go to discussion and questions from me. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick us off. If we could go to the next slide. Actually, I think we have 2 intro slides, so you can, there's the shorter title, Downtown Woodland Transit Center Study Update. If we go to the next slide. So I wanted to start by, grounding us in what we're doing here. So why are we relocating? Why are we trying to relocate our Woodland Transit Center? The transit center it serves an incredibly important role as a kind of identifiable place where transit passengers can go from one bus to another or one mode of transportation, and they come in all shapes and sizes. Here we have 2 in Yolo County. The 2 photos you see are, one is of course the Memorial Union at UC Davis, and then the West Sacramento Transit Center is up on the top right. And they also included a picture of the Dixon Transit Center because they do come in all shapes and sizes. And there's the little one in Dixon. So, the Sac Valley Station is certainly the biggest one in our region, but these serve a really important role in every community, large or small, to facilitate those transfers for people who are looking to get around town or in or out of town. Next slide. So for this particular relocation, it's really slow tonight. We have 2 main goals. The first is to improve connectivity between downtown Woodland and key regional destinations. The ambition is to change the fact that right now the Woodland is the only central business district in our service area that does not have intercity bus service. So if you're trying to get to downtown Woodland, you have to transfer or walk about a mile from the current transit center to get there. So we envision a 1-seat ride between downtown Woodland and the other key destinations that are served by our intercity Route 42, which of course has 30-minute service during rush hour and about 25,000 monthly riders across the system. Next slide. Our second goal, as it slowly emerges from the ether, is to improve personal security for Yolo bus passengers in Woodland. We do receive regular reports of unsafe conditions at County Fair Mall. This summer was, I would say, particularly bad. The city has worked very hard to improve the situation and to address some of the illegal activity that was happening there, but there was a lot of bad things that were happening there this summer, and we continue to hear concerns from our riders. And we know safety is a big issue for transit. In one 2016 study in LA Metro, 30% of former transit riders cited personal safety concerns as the reason they stopped taking transit. And we also know that women are particularly impacted by unsafe conditions on transit, with fully 75% of women transit riders experiencing harassment or theft. So when the transit center is unsafe, it has a particular impact on women, and we know that that is unfortunately the situation that we have right now at the County Fair Mall. Just a quick snapshot of Woodland Transit ridership. What are we talking about? When we talk about our ridership, we have our 215, which is our Cache Creek services. It gives about 14,000 rides per month. So it's actually the second highest ridership in our system after the 42. And then we have our 211 and 212, which are our Woodland local services that kind of go around town. They give about 4,500 rides a month. Beeline, which is now up at 3,000 rides a month. And then the 42AB, which, as I mentioned, is about 25,000 rides all around the system. And then for all of these services, the transit center is the top destination in Woodland because it's where people transfer. And so this is a place where a lot of people have to spend a lot of time if they're riding transit in Yolo County. It's also where our 42s start and end. So people who are trying to get from Davis to the airport have to wait at the County Fair Mall to continue on their way. So it's not just Woodland riders that are impacted, but really anyone who's passing through Woodland. Next slide. So just to remind you that we've been kind of a long road up until now. We completed a draft study in November 2019 to locate a transit center in downtown Woodland that was never finalized or approved. In April 2023, the board acted to prepare an updated analysis for an on-street transit center in downtown Woodland, kind of picking up where the last study left off with some modifications based on the new reality that we're in post-COVID. And so we worked with our consultant Kimley Horn and City of Woodland staff to evaluate alternative sites and recommend a preferred location. And in doing that, we had a long list of siting criteria, which I won't go through in detail. You've seen them before, but this list of siting criteria is a blend of what things are important for Yolo bus and then things are important for the city. We know the downtown is a really important center, and there's a lot of demands on downtown, and so we wanted to be mindful of all of the different competing needs and priorities that there are for downtown, and so that's what this citing criteria were used for. With that, I'm gonna turn it over to Brian, who's really been the lead on doing all the analysis and getting us to this point. Over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Autumn. So as Autumn alluded, we've done quite a bit of analysis. I looked at several different sites, and this slide sort of shows you, four of the sites we looked at really closely. And sort of how we ended up sort of with our preliminary preferred alternatives. So we won't go through each one with their fatal flaw, but we can return to them if you have questions about which ones didn't become our preliminary preferred alternative. Because recall it did take action in April of 2024, identifying the second and Court Street location as that preferred alternative. We'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please. And of course, throughout this process over about the past 18 months, we brought the analysis of the alternatives to our Citizens Advisory Committee that unanimously supported the second Court Street location. We also did a transit rider survey in December of 2023. This is all information you received back in April of 24 that didn't seem like many of our existing transit riders were heavily invested in the existing County Fair Mall location. So, we think that we're on solid ground and proposing to move out of there. But then the second bullet there, just sort of focusing on, the importance of being accessible by walking and bicycling. Next slide. And if you recall, and there we go. So this is just a general conceptual layout of what the second and Court Street alternative sort of looks like. 3 bays on the north side, 1 bay on the south side. This is the same layout that we showed you back in April. We've since developed this into more comprehensive 30% design, but this is a simplified exhibit, and not a whole lot has changed from it since then. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned the April 24 board meeting a couple of times. So at that meeting, you affirmed that location as a preliminary preferred alternative, but there were still some questions that we wanted to have more certainty about. So there were, let's see. Yeah, so we needed to better understand some of the circulation related issues and just sort of the infrastructure. And that was why we called it preliminary preferred. We felt like it was in a pretty good location. We felt like it could work for us, but let's advance this to 30% design to see, just to make sure before we, jump all in. So that's what the second action that the board took was to authorize us to do that work. And we've since done that. So again, traffic impacts and concerns, ensuring feasibility. Next slide. And several of the primary questions really involve sort of circulation and whether or not, is the transit center compatible with existing traffic volumes, turning volumes at the intersections? If there are traffic signal upgrades that are needed, what is the cost of that? What would the timing of that look like with respect to the timing of trying to locate and move into that location? And then how much would it cost? And what other infrastructure improvements are needed? We've addressed all of those over the past, 8-9 months. And I feel like we're at sort of a pivot point where, we need to make a decision whether or not we're going to move forward with this location. Next slide, please. During this 30% design phase, we've been coordinating with the city and recognizing that there are some infrastructure improvements they would like to see in the project area, particularly at the intersection of Second and Court Street, to try to improve the safety of that crossing because it's an signalized, uncontrolled intersection, and we have 2 sides of the transit center on both sides of the street. So we won't go into all the details, but we did include those requested infrastructure improvements into our 30% design, and we do have cost estimates that raise it from about $415,000, which didn't include the required ADA ramp improvements, so you have to add that cost under the 415. But it did raise the cost to about $1.2 million, quite a bit more than we had originally anticipated the cost of moving to that location being. So once we got to the point where we felt like we had, a lot of those, preliminary design issues resolved, we did begin to socialize this with some of the elected officials in Yolo County and the city of Woodland. We met with them twice, or we had three different meetings, and we didn't get the sense of enthusiasm that we had hoped for, and to locate to this location. We did raise some concerns, some of which were understandable, and others which I think sort of reflect some perhaps misperceptions about the scale of what this transit center is going to look like, and other possible accompanying social challenges that they feel like accompanies a transit center. So, next slide. So that has us thinking that we're struggling to see a predictable path moving forward on this location, given the the feedback that we've gotten so far. So this is why we're talking about that pivot point and possibly looking at some other alternatives. Still remains a fact is that we want to get out of the county fair mall because of the safety issues. Those remain a major concern for us. The level of support that we felt like we needed for the Second and Court Street location, we don't sense that we have that in order to move forward at that location. We do have a long-term opportunity in front of us that we'll be discussing in a few short slides. But that's really a longer-term option. It doesn't substitute for the need to relocate out of the county fair mall in the near term. So that's why we're looking at this from sort of a two-pronged approach, short-term and long-term. Next slide, please. So we'll start with a long-term opportunity first. This is with respect to the Housing Authority's redevelopment site at the Yolo Donnelly housing location. And that location is at roughly the corner of East Street and Lehman Avenue. And the opportunity here for us is that we are in a position to apply for grant funding in partnership with them for a purpose-built transit center that's in close proximity to downtown, and with those grant funds being an eligible expense to pay for that transit center. So that's one of our interests in this site. And we're actively collaborating with the Housing Authority and the city on their grant application, which is going to be due this spring. Next slide, please. Now, that project, that housing redevelopment project, is a high priority for both the city and the county. And the catch with that grant program is that anybody who applies for those grant funds has to have VMT reducing transportation, either programming or infrastructure accompanying it. And this project likely won't be very competitive without the transit center component to it. We've been sort of talking with the city and the Housing Authority about this opportunity. And when they decided that they were going to go ahead and apply for these funding, that's when we started to really engage and explore this for our long-term solution. But there are some risks associated with it. It's a very competitive grant program and oversubscribed by multiple. And so if it's not funded in this cycle, another 2 years, you need to wait, apply again. So it pushes out the time frame for the long-term transit center for us. There's also some access problems to getting into downtown from that site. We still have a long-term goal of wanting to serve the downtown Woodland, but being able to make the train movements we need to is a bit of a challenge. So we'd like to get some assurances that we'll be able to route our buses the way that we need to in order to serve the downtown directly with our routes. Okay, next slide, please. Short term is we're starting to think a little bit more seriously about relocating to the Gateway Costco Shopping Center. This obviously isn't our preferred location because we would have included it in our earlier analyses, and our direction prior had been to explore, the downtown. That had been where our focus was. And there's some advantages and disadvantages to this location. The first advantage is that the infrastructure is largely already there, so don't think we would need to make a significant investment, and so it could facilitate a more timely, least costly, relocation to that place. The drawbacks are that, it's the immediate location of that transit center doesn't have any development, immediately surrounding. So there is a little bit of a sense of isolation there, despite the fact that it's an active and thriving retail, dining, health services center. This particular location doesn't have that level of activity around it. And there would be some significant route impacts to our local woodland routes. But nonetheless, given our need to vacate the county fair mall, this could still be, the most likely location for us to relocate to. As we're wrapping up the presentation, so again, we have our short-term and midterm needs for a viable on-street location. We've done extensive amount of analysis. We've invested almost $320,000 between 2019 and today in analyzing all these different opportunities, for us to relocate a transit center. And based on all that, we still feel that Second and Court Street best meets our operational and service needs. But again, feeling like the level of support is not where we need it to be, that the Gateway Costco Shopping Center might be the best location. Long term, we do feel like the Yolo Donnelly property is probably our best long-term solution. But again, the risk of it not being funded in this first round could push back the timeline. So, go ahead, Bob.
So I just want to jump in here. I know this is a lot. We've done a lot of information at you, and this is a major shift away from the last time we've had this conversation. But want to answer your questions, but I also want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from both Ken and Ian that are here. So yeah, so however you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn to my colleagues. We'll do some clarifying questions first of what was here, so that doesn't get lost in translation, and then we'll invite our two guests up and turn it over to them. Director Early.
For me, at least, the reason why I wanted to ask questions before we had our two folks speak is hopefully between our staff and them, it'll offer some clarity, because to your point, up to this point, we have been talking about downtown as being the transit center or location. Is so you pointed out in West Sacramento, our transit location is downtown for all intents and purposes, right? Right across the street, actually, from City Hall, also by all of the services that, again, folks who would be riding the bus would want to potentially access. So I think we were intentional about that. It was before my time. And then Sacramento's is downtown as well, right? I guess I do have a question, a clarifying question. How many transit centers in the region are not downtown? I'm sure they exist. I'd be curious, just.
I don't know in the entire region. I don't think I could say. Yeah, I don't think I could say.
Okay. Okay.
But typically, yes, typically transit centers are located kind of close to downtowns or major job destinations. In the case of Davis, for example, it's not downtown, but it is at UC Davis, which is fairly close, proximate to downtown.
Yeah, Davis, as a triple Aggie. Anytime I get a chance to drop that. No, but it is close to, UC Davis is basically downtown. It's walkable. Okay, and then just again, last question. I appreciate you saying that you talked to elected officials, but it looks like you talked to board of supervisors. Did you talk to any other elected officials, city council members, school board members in Woodland? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, so we have not presented to the Woodland City Council. It's something we've kind of been checking in with city staff about when that would be appropriate. And I think the request was made to talk with the Woodland Yolo County 2x2 because that kind of, because of the unique location right there at Court Street, immediately adjacent to the county building. I think the supervisors there who represent the district, the two that represent Woodland, had some questions and concerns and wanted to be engaged. And so that was the first place that we started.
Well, and the only reason why I ask is not suggesting that we not engage the supervisors, that sounds great. But before we would make a major shift, like, cause you're actually coming to us, I actually think you're recommending that we at least approve a shift. It would seem that we would talk to all the city council members of the city that it's supposed to be located in. Again, because they're representative of their constituents, right? So that seems like that would be also a good place, as well as I would imagine school board members, because again, kids, families affected by something like this as well, before we would, I would imagine, consider a shift. Again, no disrespect at all to our supervisors. That is absolutely one key point of information, but it also feels like there are several key points that potentially have been missed before the next immediate meeting, us then being asked to shift. That's the only feedback I would give, but potentially we'll hear more and that will educate us.
Thank you, Director Early. Any other clarifying questions before we turn? Okay.
Oh, wait.
Okay. Who wants to start? City Manager Hyatt or Director Evans? All right.
If you have a hand, go after you two.
Paul.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, members of the board, staff, and Hyatt City Manager for City of Woodland, and pleasure to be here this evening. I'll start with, right, we've been at this for 4 or 5 years now, trying to come up with the right answer for, getting a transit center into the downtown. Those that are familiar with downtown Woodland, we have a, very constrained historic downtown street fabric, layered with a railroad track, and a fair amount of cross-town traffic, right, to try to figure out how to navigate all of that and accommodate what I think is the right objective, right? How do you get, transit to the urban core where the majority of our services and civic amenities and destinations are? There's a lot to unpack here, right? I can see a little bit of shock and awe on your faces, right? How did we get here? But I'll try to sort of walk through a little bit about some of the concerns that have been raised by both the supervisors and a couple council members. And they may or may not be fatal, right? So that's kind of the concern we have. How much further do we go down this path, spending time and money investing in this Court Street location if we're not going to be able to get over some of these concerns and issues? And what we've heard so far around the Court Street option is, and it's valid, right? This is one of our most busiest corridors. It's a 2-lane road with on-street parking on both sides. Some of that would have to go away. It's right at the county admin building. It's right at the downtown post office. And there's a lot of traffic that exists there today. And I think there's this difficulty in trying to envision how a transit hub would weave into that context. Traffic on Court Street, particularly during peak hours, and when you have an uncontrolled crossing right there at 2nd Street, which Brian pointed out, some of the improvements that we're looking at, creates significant congestion challenges. Is the main crossing point for people that would be transitioning from one bus route to the other. So the supervisors have, primarily raised questions around what does that do from a safety standpoint to the transit riders? How much volume are we talking about of people getting off of one bus and needing to cross the street at one time? And what does that look like, right? So I think they got a little paralyzed around, is this really the right location to try to force this transit hub? And some of the other options that were looked at, they've had some questions that I think have been unsatisfactorily answered to the point that they say, yeah, okay, you sufficiently evaluated that alternative. And that was the one a little bit to the west of the 2nd Street location, a little bit further past the library, where it opens up a little bit. But you know, the challenges with that location, which have been confirmed and I think supported both by staff, city and the transit district, is that pushes the hub further west, which, you know, has some operational inefficiencies as well as some substantial improvements that will probably have to be made. Really not supportive of going that direction. So, you know, we're at this juncture where do we continue to try to answer questions, and we don't know if there's going to be an end to some of these questions. They'll be satisfied. The hope was to actually test what does a transit hub operate in a live condition look like, and actually invite public to come down and see what a transit hub in the downtown looks like on this corridor in the evening. So we haven't even solicited feedback yet from the business community, so we don't know what kind of reaction they will have, positive or negative to it. So I sympathize, right, with Director Bernstein's sort of situation that she's in at the moment. And, you know, a bit caught off guard. We have a week's notice about, hey, how about Costco? I'm not sold on Costco as a location for a transit hub. I understand fully why that might make some sense, but I'm concerned about the operational routing changes that would have to take place and the impacts that that would have, not just on the riders themselves, but also on the cost to shift it out there. I think there's going to be some substantial operational costs that would be absorbed into the annual budget that I don't think the budget's in a position to start absorbing more costs. So I throw out one suggestion, and I brought this up many times, and it was actually on the slide, and that's a location south of Main Street by the courts, as well as the police station. The school district office building is right there. It's also where our historic train station used to be. So it's one of the primary employment destinations, one of the primary destinations for county residents trying to access the courts, whether you're a juror or somebody attending courts. It'd be very convenient, that location. You know, there are some things that I think we need to evaluate that have been brought up by staff, but I don't know if they're fatal yet. So I would ask the opportunity to at least vet that first before we abandon downtown as an option. So I see some wrinkled foreheads trying to say, what are you talking about? Which location specifically? But if you've been to the Yolo County Court building, that's on Main Street. That runs a block. So south of Main Street would be Lincoln, the very back end of the court property. If you ever served on a jury and you parked in the jury parking lot, I'm thinking about that stretch of roadway that's right there adjacent to the jury parking lot, which is almost always empty, which creates another opportunity for riders to be able to park and ride if that's necessary. So we think there's a way to potentially route the buses. You know, I'm not a bus routing expert though, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I would say before we abandon downtown entirely, if we're going to be looking at other options, I'd like to ask the board to consider directing staff to work with the city to, at least at the staff level, vet that a little bit more before we move out downtown. With respect to the long-term plan, the city is very supportive of the YoloTD redevelopment project, and we are excited to integrate that transit hub into that project again, because I think integrating a transit hub into a redevelopment project is the best way to do it, rather than trying to take a transit hub and fit it into the downtown historic urban fabric. That's a little bit more challenging. So we have an opportunity here to actually, from the ground up, build a purpose-built transit hub as part of the project. So the city's, you know, both financially and politically committed to see that project move forward. Staff mentioned the county as well has pledged over $1 million to help seed fund the redevelopment of that neighborhood, which is probably the most underserved and poorest neighborhood within Woodland. And so we're committed to you know, bring this neighborhood better into the community and provide access to transit, but also actually bring services into the neighborhood as well. So I'll pause there. Happy to answer any questions board may have.
Sure, thank you. Any of my colleagues have any questions for City Manager Hyatt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, like, if I call, I can't go first.
Go ahead. I need to,
Yeah, early.
Okay. So just a couple of questions. Is there a reason why we haven't gone before city council yet? And ask you, because you're the city manager, if you're anything like my city manager, you would know.
Well, that was the intent. The intent was to go to the city county 2x2 last month, get concurrence on moving forward with this alternative. Actually test, as I indicated in real time, what a transit hub downtown looks like. Invite the public to actually see that. Bring all that information forward to the council before asking the council to take a position.
I guess, you know, there's different approaches, right? Because that in and of itself is time intensive and all the things, and so, it might have been, and still might behoove us before going through that, to get city council's, thoughts on this. So that that can be incorporated into whatever they're testing versus doing all the things and then saying, here, we've got this nice pretty package for you. Please vote. Because they may want to, based on both their experience in the community, what they have heard, to be able to contribute to and be a thought partner, to some degree on what some of this looks like, this whole thing, versus it being more of a baked product, before it gets to them. So that would be one thought. I do have a question because I also have the joy and appreciation of getting to work with Ian, and I sit on the housing authority, as well. I'm a glutton for punishment. And I'm curious about, the project in which I'm ever so slightly concerned, about this transit center being more on the outskirts, by being a part of, the Yolo project, but maybe I might be conflating, with New Hope, potentially.
Well, sorry, you're concerned about the geographic location
Mhm,
of
yeah.
Donnelly relative to the downtown?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's not in the middle of downtown, right? So it is separated by East Street, which is a busy corridor. We have received about $1 million grant from SACOG, and the general plan calls for revisioning East Street into a complete street. And so right now, majority of East Street doesn't have bike lanes. A lot of it doesn't even have sidewalks. So our vision, hopefully in alignment with Yolo Donnelly, will be to revision East Street to make it more bikeable and walkable. And as part of that project, figure out how to get folks by bike and walking across East Street safely and make it more connected.
Okay.
So the long-term plan is actually, you know, have Yolo Donnelly actually feel like a neighborhood adjacent to downtown.
Do we know if, members of that particular community would want a transit center there? And I say that only because that is a lot of activity. And so I guess that would. And also, would our riders want that to be a place where they are shifting, parking, waiting as well, all of the things that come with a transit center? Do we have at least any idea at all?
Yeah, at this point, we're about to start the public outreach in earnest, but we did do a visioning process funded by SACOG, thank you.
On that too.
That looked at, you know, revisioning of that corridor, and I believe in that process, we even pointed to, you know, improving access via transit to the neighborhood. And that was ultimately approved by city council, and there was no negative, you know, reactions to it. You
But
know,
that was more like a bus route
Devil-
versus a transit center, right?
Yeah.
Which are kind of different things.
Devil's in the detail when you get down to, you know, transit center. And again, as the director indicated, right, that conjures up all kinds of different experiences people might have from transit centers elsewhere. And so, you know, I think the size and scale of the transit center that we're talking about here is not, you know, as urban, really, and won't be as intense given the volume of buses that we work with. But to your point, right, we haven't started that process, and, you know, we haven't received a, you know, community feedback on that concept. And again, we want to make sure we have enough information to give them an accurate representation of what it could be.
Have we received community feedback on our downtown location? I know we've been at it since 2019. Either one or both.
So we did a survey of our existing transit center to ask them about their thoughts and feelings about relocating in general out of the county fair mall into a location downtown. I think the number was 4%.
That was the 4%
Yeah,
and the
negative.
38%.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, so 4% had negative feelings about that. The
They
vast
probably
majority was
didn't answer the question.
supportive or neutral on that. But again, we did not have a preferred location at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Director Early. Director Warren?
And I just didn't know if, Mr. Stoller wanted to speak to this, but, so we have a transit center in a shopping center that is, in derelict condition. There's people that are, maybe, make other people feel that they're not safe. And that's the moment that we're in, and we've been trying to address it for 5 years. So that's, I just wanted to like
Level set.
level set that, yeah. And then, as we've been pursuing this, and I have been on the board this whole time. I believe that, Mr. Sellers was chair in 23 when we were looking at this. I think that I can't speak for the whole board, but my feeling was that, you know, we really have a good plan and a really good location. And this is gonna be really good for Woodland, right, to have this downtown. So I wanted to level set that too. So I'm looking at, an uncertainty of, let's bring in another location that we haven't looked at. And, having to scope that, per your suggestion, and then, or move, to the Costco area that is pretty far out of town. I guess my questions are, how does that serve the community of riders? How do we, satisfy our mission of getting people to where they want to go with those constraints? And also the financial constraints. So, those are some of the things that I'm weighing. And then the other one, when I'm looking for direction, is, I'm really excited about any time that we can procure more housing for people in need and provide transit. Like, yeah, that's a win-win. But I was in our packet, it does, mention that there's, routing constraints. I hate to read it to you, but it's the way it works for me. To serve the Yolano Donnelly site, our buses would need to route along the streets the city has previously deemed undesirable for buses. YoloTD would need guarantees from the city that we can make routing decisions between the new transit center and existing stops and key destinations that are operationally preferable. If I'm gonna support something that is gonna be 10 years or 15 years down the road, I want that assurance that the city of Woodland is gonna, you know, help us get there. So those are all the things for me. Ken.
Well, first of all, those aren't my words, undesirable for buses. There are streets, unfortunately, that directly access Yolano Donnelly across East Street that are very narrow residential streets. That's not by, you know, our interpretation, it's just a fact,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we have residents that front onto those streets, and putting buses on those streets are probably not gonna be well received. And especially when you compare to the past 2 cars on that street right now. So we brought the issue up that, you know, we need to think about, this is North Street. You know, how we're gonna get in and out of Yolano Donnelly and into downtown efficiently, right? Court Street has its challenges, you know, North Street has its challenges. We have railroad tracks that aren't going away, so, right? Absolutely 100% agree that we need to understand, you know, what the routing and circulation patterns will be that would support the transit hub. And, you know, we don't want to spend any time, you know, chasing transit hub that can't be supported by, you know, efficient routing.
Yeah.
But, you know, we're not trying to put obstacles in the way. We're just saying, you know, these are realities that we just need to navigate around. So fully support, right? Let's figure out if we can serve it before we launch into an application. So I think that was intended to be the next phase of this discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you. Director Stoller, Director Stoller. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just ask, in this conversation, I'm not quite discerning, is the problem the routing of the buses and bus stops? Or that it's a transit center? Because we could put the transit center itself where the buses lay over and have kind of an extra period of rest. In a different spot, but still route the buses so that there's downtown access and the ability to switch between bus lines. So do you think it's the transit center activity or it's the bus routing?
When you say it, so you're referring to concerns raised by the supervisors, primarily, and some degree the council member or the 2x2. I would say it's more the former. It's just the activity around the transit hub with, the transfers and pedestrians getting on and off, crossing the street, and then buses navigating in and out of traffic in that corridor, and less so the staging of buses. I think staff's done a good job of saying that will be very limited, duration for where the buses are, what's the word?
Staging.
Staging. That was a more fancy term than that. So I think it's more just the overall sort of activity and the congestion around that, the bus hub there.
Okay, that's helpful. And I do know, like downtown Davis has quite a bit of traffic activity, pedestrian and bike activity, and bus activity on narrow 2-lane streets, and that seems to work. So I would want a chance to have a conversation. I think it could work in Woodland as well to have that level of activity.
If I may, I just want to add that, to your question about, is it the routing or is it the location? I mean, so I mentioned at the beginning, we had a long list of citing criteria, and some of that was trying to respect preferences around not having the buses on narrow residential streets, and also kind of having buses stopping in front of active businesses. You point out that that is not the case in downtown Davis, where you do have buses on Second Street, which is a narrow constrained street. But so the locations that we looked at were constrained based on the routing concerns. So in other words, we really only looked at locations on streets like Court Street. That's why so many of our locations are on Court Street, for example. So I think there could potentially have been other options, were we not trying to operate within those constraints. But there are also very real constraints around turns when you have narrow streets. And anyway, so there's a lot of complexity. From my perspective, I will say we've looked at a lot of different locations. The Ken mentioned one location that we don't think works operationally, south of Main Street. Again, we feel like we have looking at the constraints that we have from an operations perspective and the city has, I'm skeptical at this point that there is some other place out there that we just haven't looked at. Based on the constraints and the political realities that we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Early.
My expertise, it basically, and experience really has just occurred over the past couple of years of me being here. So similar to me not pretending to be a lawyer, I also don't pretend to be like a traffic expert in any way, shape, or form. And so, and I say all that to say that there are like some projects that have been built in my own city where I'm like, God, how is that even possible that traffic's not gonna be an issue? And then experts come in and they do the analysis. We have this happen on SACOG all the time. And there's a formula that is used. I guess I'm curious from this perspective, understanding that our supervisors, and it sounds like maybe two of the council members, I don't know about the 2x2s. I'm assuming it's 2 supervisors and 2 council members.
Yeah.
Who's the council member that's on there? Who are the 2 council members?
Well, Lansburg and Fernandez is off as of tomorrow evening, so.
Okay. Is that Vicky?
Yeah.
Okay, so understanding that potentially they've been working through, have we gotten some level in our analysis of what traffic, pedestrian activity, all of that would look like and the feasibility of that?
So we did, as part of the 30% design that you authorized back in April, we did do that traffic analysis, and we found that none of the intersections would be, we're talking about 8 buses an hour.
Right.
So we don't, that analysis doesn't show that there would be any negative traffic impacts. I think the more recent concern that was brought up is about that idea of pedestrians crossing the street to transfer, and whether that would cause traffic impacts by all the pedestrians slowing down the through traffic on Court Street. We don't have that kind of analysis. We could try, but I'm not really convinced that the effort that it would take to do an analysis like that necessarily is going to address the concerns, if that makes sense.
I mean, so I'm gonna speak frankly, yes and no. It makes sense, because I think what I'm hearing is underlying that we can use science and data to say, hey, this isn't going to be an issue. And it sounds like thinking, even with data and science, and the analysis by experts, that it will still be an issue.
I mean, we could,
I don't.
we could continue to do it. Again, I don't see a timely resolution. I think there's, you know, what's that saying? Do you want it done fast? Do you want it done cheap? Or do you
Well,
want it done
10 years
well?
from now, it's
Right.
certainly not gonna be fast, right? Cause then that's like
That's true.
15 years, so if the analysis is gonna take me like another 6 months. Compared to a hope and a prayer that the application works and that this other location, after then investing a couple of $100,000 in that analysis. Like, I mean, like, all of them are gonna take long, and so the question is. You know, what is the actual feasibility of the 5 years that have already been spent on this? The several $100,000 and time and staff that have been spent on this, if it's going to be a couple months more of then answering these questions, going in front of city council members, right? Showing that it works in Davis, showing that there are transit centers throughout the region that are downtown, right? Like that feels like it might be worth it. But I'll tell them I'm talking about your city, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Early. I'll turn to Director Stallworth and
Go
then
ahead.
back to Director Warren.
My participation here today is qualified. I'm not speaking to the downtown issue because it's close to my own property.
Oh.
So now you
you.
understand why I'm being quiet. But there are other options out there that are within things I can talk about. So I want to just say that I really appreciate deeply the care you're showing for our community with this discussion. Thank you.
Director Warren.
Yeah, your community and my community, we're the same community. I just had a couple questions about the Costco site, not, although I really appreciated your question, all of them. So if we, had our transit center move to the Costco site, especially answering the safety concerns of where we are now, would we still be able to route downtown and service the downtown?
It's a great question. So, you know, the analysis that we've done, I think will be helpful for Yolanda Donnelly and for future routing. We do currently serve downtown. We don't serve it with our 42s. The key question is there capacity at our existing stops in downtown? Because remember, we do have 2 stops at the county building, right? And so we're really talking about adding 2 additional bus bays to allow for more buses to be there at the same time. Could we route the 42s to our existing bus stops on top of the existing routes? Potentially. That's not the analysis that we've done, right? Because we've wanted to look at the buses being there simultaneously so that people can transfer. I will turn to my technical expert to see what he thinks about that idea, but I will say that we have not done that analysis.
I would say I'm not really qualified to answer that question. So I wouldn't want to speculate, given there's only one space there. And both directions of the 42 A and B need to use that north side of the street. And if we're looking, it depends on the level of service that we're offering as well. If we're going half an hour headways on that 42 A and B, that's 2 per hour in each direction. And depending on whether they're on time or they're not on time, it's not, I don't feel comfortable, you know, answering that question. With respect to pedestrians crossing the street, keep in mind that there's one bay, we're proposing one bay on the south side, which is fundamentally just the route 211, which is a local route, which is not very heavily utilized. So we're looking at what, 4,000 a month between the 211 and the 212. So divide that in half, and then, you know, divide that by 30 days a month, and by, you know, 12 hours in a day, and you're talking about not many people riding the bus, let alone platoons of people getting on or off at that location and crossing the street onto another bus. So the likelihood of there being, you know, platoons of pedestrians crossing the street and causing traffic congestion just doesn't compute with just sort of my, you know, sort of understanding of what the ridership is actually on that route.
If I can just add, I mean, that level of information though was not really available to, you know, the supervisors and city council. So I think, you know, I agree that, you know, it'd be a shame to abandon what is a potentially really good alternative, you know, without fully vetting, you know, these issues. But I want to respect, you know, some measure of, frustration and budget fatigue and, going down this path, if there isn't an outcome that's gonna be, favorable. So as far as the city's concerned, there is a path to make that work. But, it's gonna take some additional effort, and inputs, and I am not gonna go to council without community input. So our council will get, railroaded, without public input on weighing in on an alternative that the public hasn't. So I would advocate for, doing that additional analysis and seeing what the public, reacts, and also, stage it in real time to see what it looks like instead of look at an engineer's report on a piece of paper and take their word for it. So that's, my recommendation at this point, especially before launching and spending any money on looking at Bronze-Star and out by Costco, but.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. So as City Manager Hyatt just mentioned, if we were to move forward with this action that's laid out here tonight, does that abandon the downtown location?
It doesn't say anything about the downtown location. It recommends that we do some analysis to just understand, is Costco an option? If it doesn't work out, my colleagues' confidence and optimism notwithstanding, it would give us the ability to say, do we have another option for getting out of the county for long? It doesn't preclude us from continuing those discussions, but I will say, we are out of budget at this point. For doing additional analysis, and also I'll highlight, the $400,000 per capital cost is what we had put in our budget based on what the cost estimates were initially. It's now triple that, right? So where we are now. We're talking about, if we continue to go down this road, we're talking about significant additional expense. And I understand that, like, we've invested a lot in this, and if it's the will of this board that we continue to push and we continue to invest more to answer these questions and answer the additional questions that come up, and be prepared to spend that fun amount of money, given our constrained budget, absolutely. We like this location. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, and forgive me if this was stated earlier, what's the projected cost to go and do the work on the Costco location?
I want to say it's what, 20,000?
Yeah, for the feasibility study, we're looking at 25,000
And the timeline's how long?
for completing the feasibility study.
Yeah, like what's that look like?
Few months probably.
And I don't want anyone who's in this room or who may watch this to take this the wrong way. But the elephant in the room is like, if this was in the city of Davis, I would wanna have exactly what you're talking about, right? I would wanna see this come to a city council, I'd wanna have input, I'd wanna have feedback, I'd wanna have all the information needed on something that's impacting my downtown. All that being said, what partnership, what do we need? Do we need, and again, please do not take this the wrong way, I'm not implying we don't, I'm trying to figure out what do we need in terms of approval from the city of Woodland or approval from wherever to put the transit center where this board thinks it should go? What is that? And again, I'm not saying that I'm just curious to know.
Appreciate you asking the obvious.
Yeah, like if this board says, three people up here say, I want this thing to be down and we're gonna stop spending money, we wanna put it on second in court. What happens?
So any infrastructure improvements that are required, the city owns the right of way. So any infrastructure improvements that we would want to make in terms of curb cuts, pedestrian improvements, et cetera, would be the changes to parking, and those all need to be approved by the city.
Got it.
Can I follow up on that? Okay, but thus far, we haven't put it in front of the city council, and so it's hard, because I agree with you, I too, that's actually why I'm asking, appreciating that our staff have been working with you. I don't always agree with my city manager, that's just the reality, and so I would want it put in front of me, like I would want to be able to speak to what are the needs of my community, what am I hearing, all of those things. And we have not done that, and so for me, I'm just sharing, I hesitate to say, go spend 25,000 when I don't feel like we've necessarily done what was needed to move it forward here.
Absolutely, and to be clear, it was always our intention to do that public outreach. As you heard, from Ken, I think that the hope was, let's bring this to the 2x2, let's resolve the issues with the 2x2, and then do that outreach. and then go to the city council. That is the plan that we had agreed upon. And so we've stopped based on the feedback that we have here. We wanted to bring this to you to get your direction on, do we keep going down this road? Do we continue to pursue this, knowing that we're out of budget and we need to answer some of these questions and to keep this moving forward? We have to recommit to this site, if you will, to continue to do the analysis that's needed. But I also just want, if I can say, if this feels rushed, I wanted, that the other really important new piece of information is that there is the opportunity for this AHSC application that is going to be due in April. And so the other part of the motion that, or the staff recommendation, is there's work that needs to happen in order for us to be prepared, not just some of the discussions about routing that you've heard about with the city, but also design of that location so that we have something that we can feel confident about. And that is coming, in April's gonna happen very quickly. So that's the other piece that we feel like we had to bring you something on that. So, you know, whether or not you feel comfortable making a decision about Costco and Gateway tonight, if there is a desire from this board to pursue the AHSC application, we need to get moving.
Yeah, they can be bifurcated.
That's right.
And then, yeah,
And they're two separate
right,
resolutions.
exactly, yeah.
And I just want to remind that we do have Ian here as well.
Sure, yeah.
Make sure we have a chance for him.
Yeah, we're just gonna keep City Manager Hyatt on the hot seat over there. Joey, we never spend time with you. I'll turn to Director Gosich.
I was gonna ask about the, Yolanda Donnelly site and the phrase, developing a transit center there, is that at that site or just in proximity? I see like, that's not downtown either, that does not create a downtown transit center. So is that a point of this discussion that you wanted feedback on?
Ian Evans jumped up out of his seat, so maybe if you wanted to stay up here, Ken, and just have Ian pull a seat up, we'll keep both of you up here so we can just. Is that okay? Thank you. Welcome in.
Being the chair, board members, I feel like we're at court or something, have like representation, I don't know. Like, I can't answer that, I need to one with the tie on to answer that, please.
You had to fill out like.
Yeah, the question's been asked or commented on around proximity to downtown a couple times. City Manager Ken Hyatt mentioned that there was about 2 years of work done in partnership with the city of Woodland on a SACOG grant to outreach to the community, not just our residents, but the larger Armfield neighborhood district and neighborhood overall. And one of the things that we heard in the key feedback from that study was that folks felt that it was good proximity to downtown, but disconnected because of transit. So I think that's where we kind of thought, hey, there's an opportunity here. And before we even got the development partners on board, where we realized not only is there an opportunity here, but there's a great funding opportunity to enhance this. We had this idea of better connection, better multimodal transportation options. We have the same challenges on Lehman in Yolanda Donnelly that Ken mentioned on East Street, where we don't even have complete sidewalks in some of the neighborhoods there. We don't have bike lanes. And so the staff report mentioned $15 million figure for the AHSC application, which will be due around April. That is the maximum just for the transportation aspect of it. The total application could be a total of $30 million. And so there could be up to $15 million to help support the housing that we are building there. And for those that are less familiar with that project, I know several folks on here are familiar with that project, but we are talking about a space where there's 132 existing public housing units. We have lots of vacant land. We're going to build new units, move those existing residents out, tear down the existing units and go more dense with the goal to eventually have around 400 total affordable housing units there. So almost tripling the amount of units. And to Director Bernstein's comments earlier, we don't have a competitive AHSC or ASIC application without the support that Director Bernstein and her staff are asking for today. We also don't have a competitive application without the city partnership. And so we have been having conversations for a couple of months now around this, and just very, very supportive of or very appreciative of the support from YCPD staff and from the city of Woodland staff. We actually met today about a SACOG grant that the city was the lead applicant and award on, and we New Hope CDC was the community-based organization awardee on the Engage, Empower, and Implement grant. So we were awarded $500,000 with the hope that that would allow for some of the pre-development and planning effort that is needed specifically for the housing, but also around the transportation and the mobility access for that. And so we're excited about that opportunity. We have done some community engagement, and you've heard from both Director Bernstein and City Manager Hyatt. A requirement of the AHSC application will be ongoing community engagement before application, so that we're bringing this forward to the community, getting their feedback and showing a response to them, what that feedback looks like before we submit.
Thank you, Ian. One nuanced question there, for that, the grant application sounds super important. Does it need to have transit access and efficient services, or the next step of being a transit center? And we used to have, be short of being a transit center, but have transit access and still be competitive.
Yeah, I'll defer to the technical terminology around, again, I'm also not a transit expert, and so staging, I would have thought it was a more intense term also, but but I think, maybe there's some discussion, I don't know if it's too preliminary to even talk about the type of transit option we're talking about over there. I think we're envisioning this like large transit center, and that's not exactly what we're proposing there. And so that might help provide some clarification. The competitiveness of the AHSC application looks at things like VMT and GHG reductions, looks at, we have to have 2 miles of bike loops and sidewalks. And so when we look at it, it's not just that Lehman, our neighborhood there, it's a 1 mile radius. So you heard some of the things like the East Street corridor improvements that the city wants to do, some of that connectivity to downtown, that can all be looked at in this 1 mile radius for the application overall. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Well, I think specifically, and Autumn may know better than me, but I believe the grant to be eligible, you need to have 30-minute headways on an inner city route.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a transit hub, it has to be served by 15 or 20-minute headway maybe.
It doesn't have to be inner city, but it does have to be 30-minute headways. Yeah. Which the only service we have in within the 30-minute headways is the 42.
Yeah.
So it needs to be served, it does need to be served, in terms of but to be competitive, the more transit improvements, the better.
Yeah.
Would it?
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Director Earl?
So I do wanna just get a very clear, because I thought that was an excellent question. I was headed that way. And so, but I don't, we got it, yes or no. Would it even, so taking into account, so 2 things. One, West Sac is applying for this grant as well, so it's just a reality.
Oh, I know.
Competition's good. But I do know there is a lot of specificity, and like the packet of like all the things that have to be checked are very intense. And so I really do want to get clarity on, does it need to be a transit center, or could we have it be again, very transit heavy without it having to be a transit center?
I don't know if any of us can answer that question in that detail. Can you, Brian?
Just because that's what I do want to clarify, because I was slightly confused when you said, hey, these could be split up, because I thought with number 2, you were also asking us, could Yolanda Donnelly be a transit center, like the alternative to this downtown? So that's why I'm confused.
Yeah, so the idea would be, I think the idea, as this concept has developed and grown legs, to have a permanent location at Yolanda Donnelly, the idea would be that the downtown location would be a temporary location, which then as the cost continues to escalate, right, you say, okay, well, how much do we want to spend for a temporary location? When we began these conversations, and even as recently as April, this was not a thing yet. We had to start having these conversations. So we were thinking of the downtown location as someplace we want to get to quickly that could evolve into a permanent location. But if we're talking about Yolanda Donnelly and kind of committing to that, then it makes the Court Street location that much more of a temporary solution.
Okay, but just to be clear, even if it was a temporary solution, would we need to spend 1.4 million to make it a temporary solution? And I just want clarity on what I'm saying yes to or no to, or.
Well, I think that's something that's subject to conversation, and it's something that Ken and I have talked about, is this list of requests.
1.2, my bad.
Is that something that is, do all of those need to come online initially just for it to be an interim location, or could some of those be phased in over time if it becomes a permanent location? If for whatever reason, we decide that that's the longer term location and it doesn't materialize at Yolo Donnelly. So, but those are kind of the conversations that have not happened.
Okay, I haven't been here since 2019, hence all of my questions to just understand. If we made downtown a temporary location, short-term location, whatever we wanna call it, would that take us out of the county mall? Cause I will tell you, I too wouldn't feel safe, just BT dubs, there.
That was the idea, was this location could be, if we could get in there with relatively minimal improvement, and compared to every other location we've looked at in downtown Woodland, this is the one that needs the least amount of work.
Okay,
So that we could get out of the county fair mall quickly. Which is. So yes, that would be the hope, that was the idea, was that this would be a location that we could get into fairly quickly.
okay, and I promise, very last question, promise, just,
Nothing, yeah,
sorry.
an important issue.
So at least, is there a world then where we move forward with this, right? With the reenactment of what this could be, at night? Hopefully there'll be axes involved, invite me. Will you? Okay, he's in too.
All right.
I'll run across the street. Could we do that and still, it sounds like, say yes to this? And there might be a world in which maybe we could get this online or short term, sometime, hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, while we're still waiting for this very competitive grant, because if we don't get this grant, then there's other stuff. I hope we get this grant. I'm rooting for us.
I don't know if I want to answer the transit hub question and I don't want to give our secrets away to West Sacramento. But I am also not a AHSC expert, but I will say part of the calculations are vehicle mile travel, gas, GHG reductions and ridership. And so one of the keys is the 42 A and B, but the reason why I think the transit hub kind of idea started getting legs is that looking at the competitiveness of the application and looking at the overall ridership share with how we could route via transit hub, I think increases the competitive application aspect of it and help solve this long-term, potentially solve this long-term issue of moving the transit hub in Woodland and allows us, like I said, that mile range for additional bike and pedestrian access and street improvements stuff.
My only concern, not a question, because I said I wouldn't ask anymore. My only concern about that from what you just said is one, I want to pull down as much dollars as possible, but I'm now gonna channel my colleague, Jesse Lauren and Director Lauren, in that even if it makes our application more competitive on paper, is that going to best meet community needs? And that would be the only thing I would challenge there, would be which one is actually going to meet the needs of the community, not only which ones are we gonna be able to pull dollars down for. That's the last thing.
Thank you, Director Early. Director Warren.
This is a lot to digest, and there's just a lot there. Listening to everybody's comments and all the items. I would be willing to postpone item 6 to further discuss the requirements for downtown costs and what is required for the competitive grant, and bring it back at resolution 2024-30 in January.
Thank you. Do you have any further, excuse me? Sure, we do still have public comment, just so we know. that
Yeah, I
we're-
think,
Yeah, that's what I was. Okay, so any further clarifying questions before I open public comment? Okay. Thank you. City Manager Hyatt. Thank you, Ian, for being here tonight, and spending time with us.
Can I make one last public comment
Absolutely,
just
of
based
course.
on,
Yeah.
just based on what
Yeah.
was just shared right now? I think the challenge, I will say is that without the second resolution happening until January, likely the timing for what is needed to do the analysis for the AHSC application that YCTD needs to do
Could happen.
will not happen in time for us to submit the application. Their part has to come first for us to get the calculations for what we can apply for the rest of the application. So I'll just leave you with that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. With that, I'm going to open public comment on agenda item number 6, and we'll turn to converse in public comment. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to, if you don't mind, Chair Chapman, I'd like to answer a question made near the beginning of the presentation about transit centers that maybe are not necessarily in downtowns. May I answer that from my knowledge? Okay. From a Sacramento and Sacramento County perspective, while it's been mentioned, Sacramento Valley Station is probably the crux. And there's going to be a lot of work going on there to make that a big hub for a lot of the regional commuter buses in the years to come. Currently, it's only a transit hub for 2 bus routes and 1 light rail line. Many of the outlying light rail stations outside of downtown are transit hubs. You have a transit hub at Arcadia Drive and Greenback Lane in Citrus Heights. You have a variety of transit hubs at Rush River and Windbridge in the Pocket area. You have one at Casunas River College, which is a station, but a bus hub for Elk Grove and South Sacramento. So there's a lot of good examples in the region, but just across the county line where there are a lot more transit hubs other than downtown Sacramento. Sacramento State is a big transit hub with 4 or 5 bus routes right there. On the crux of this matter, thank you for the healthy discussion, Q&A, deliberation. It was really good, I think, to get that out. Director Lauren, I respect your motion. I would like and would accept it if it is the one that would carry tonight, but I would like to make a substitute motion. Based on the presentation, the slides, the discussion. I think it is imperative from a safety perspective, as pointed out by Citizen Advisory Committee member Andy J. Ferrillo, that this moving and relocating the transit center out of County Fair Mall is a safety emergency and needs to happen as soon as possible. Thank you, Andy. So I want to include that as part of the crux of why we're here tonight on item 6. Safety is first, and safety is always paramount. And it's in the agenda packet. I read some stuff about safety and injuries, and that cannot happen. The sites. So agreeing with the staff presentation and the slide, I think to use the term hot pursuit. I know that's kind of like from a cops show or something like that, but yes. The district needs to be in hot pursuit of 2nd and Court
That is
Street.
time, thank you.
Oh,
It's been 2 minutes.
may I conclude?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I would, thank you. Consider 2nd and Court priority. An alternative to 2nd and Court, the site the city manager gave around Main and Lincoln and the court and the jury, everything around there. Eliminate the Costco option as unfeasible, especially focusing on the big negative of rerouting and timing. That's horrible. And long-term, the Yolano Donnelly site should be the one over the course of the long term, and to what the executive director said, making 2nd and Court a temporary site for the next few years. And then if necessary, if my schedule holds where I have Tuesday and Wednesday off, I would be more than happy to come if it needs, I'm a nerd for designing bus routes. I would be happy to come in, have my badge on me, as I have under here, and be able to work alongside. And if there's any redesign of the 42 that needs to happen, because all 4 cities and our 2 counties are here tonight on it. That's, I think, why we're here at the table every month, especially on that route. I would be happy to come in and do some work.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. These are some things I gave out to you 4 years ago about the County Fair Mall, the current transit. These are this Alan Parrish, these are some things I gave you about the County Fair Mall current transit center, going even further deeper in it. This talks about the social injustice of citing the transit center in the mall, at the current location, far away, worse than the worst parking spot here. And now we're moving closer to the gas station. This is social injustice. This is inappropriate. The County Fair Mall stop is closer to the Walmart than this stop is gonna be. Should not be moved. And temporary, we know what temporary, we know what emergency is. It's an emergency at the County Fair Mall for 5 years now. It's a real emergency now. I mean, it's a terrible place, but it moves here, it's not gonna be temporary. It's gonna be 10 years. This is the way things work. So we should not spend the money, should not move it here. It's the wrong place. And very frankly, when I go to the airport, I don't want a scenic tour of all sorts of county. And I'm speaking, I know we have 132 residents in this development. That's great. We should get the money. But I speak for the 25,000 other riders of 42 who really should have direct service and shouldn't have their time ridiculed. So we need to consider that. So I'm really quite concerned that we're making a local decision that has regional consequences. And I don't think we have that scale here. And I'm really quite concerned that we are optimizing the entire community, the entire region's transportation by optimizing this one small development or this one small source thing. I don't understand why we've been talking about this since 2019. We even have a member who owns property in downtown Woodland on this board, who's been chair of this board, and why is this suddenly surfaced now? I don't understand the process here. It just confused. Now we have a crisis. We need to make a decision. So I mean, this Lauren's idea, I think, makes sense. We just need to have I just don't understand. This is a regional bus system. And I don't understand why you don't want as many people in your downtown area shopping. And you don't have to store cars for them on a bus. What's the problem here? And they're where they can, in front of the county courthouse, not in front of a store. So there's plenty of space here. So I don't really understand what the issue is. So I'm just confused. Please don't put it in County Fair Mall, even temporarily. It is the wrong thing to do. It is socially inequitable. The design was inequitable. And in terms of the transit center, in Davis, there was a plan for Village Farms at the corner of Colville and Pole Line. And they were gonna put a transit center in the middle of that. That would optimize, there were 10 times as many people in there that will be in this low cost housing. And they decided we're not gonna put in the center, doesn't optimize service for this one thing, because we want to optimize service for the entire bus service for all of Davis. So we moved the transit center out, put it on the street in that design. So we should optimize the entire system, not particular developments for a short-term gain. So please don't put it in County Fair Mall. Please keep it in downtown. It's the best spot. That's where it should be. And we've been staying the course. There shouldn't be a crisis here. We should stay the course that we're doing. Thank you for listening and thank you for considering the entire region's issues.
Thank you, Alan. Do we have any more in-person public comment? You want 3 more minutes? Nothing, no? You good?
Yeah.
All right.
It's like I'm tapped out.
Do we have any online public comment?
No, I'm on.
No, okay, perfect, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do want to highlight the public comment that you did receive and was referenced by one of our speakers from Mr. Andy Ferrillo, who's on our Citizens Advisory Committee, that was emailed to you, and also you have a copy at your desks. And he does request that he notes that the Citizens Advisory Committee did not have an opportunity to weigh in on this. And the Citizens Advisory Committee's next meeting is in early January, a week before, I want to say it's January 7th. His request was that it be postponed. CAC can talk about it and then come back to this board on January 3rd.
Thank you, Director Bertzi. I'm going to turn to Director Lauren.
I just had another question that, begs to be answered from the public comment, and that is, in the frame of, we've been pursuing this downtown location since 2019. How long has the, grant been pursued, by housing and by the city? Because if it's coming to me tonight and I have to decide tonight, then also, why is it coming to me so late? I'd like to have an answer to that.
Thank you, Director Warren. Is it okay to invite Ian up, or do you have that answer on him?
I don't have that answer to how long they pursued this funding.
Oh, welcome Ian back up to the mic.
So the grant application is going into cycle 9. It's been available annually. It came on our radar as a possibility, I would say, a couple months ago. The item that's before you today, I would say, came on staff's radar maybe a couple of weeks ago. So it's not something, as we've been going through, we have a free technical assistant consultant that is guiding all of our agencies through the AHSC application, since none of us are experts on this. She is. And so as we've been going through that process, some of the work that is needed in order to inform the calculations that then determine the next steps of the application kind of really came into focus the last 2 weeks or so. And that's where we had conversations with staff about, you know, what may be needed in order to get that work accomplished.
Thank you, Ian. And just, can I ask, just a quick clarifying question on building, like, so in terms of us as a board, we move something forward, and it's a quote unquote temporary location, right? If they're successful, they move that project forward, would this location that we're talking about here this evening, the temporary location, would that still be serviceable and be used if the Yolana project went forward and YTD was working with them? Like, it kind of feels like being presented like all of a sudden that would just go away, right? But it seems to me that we would have improvements made downtown, you'd have a new location, right? And then it would still be part of that network. Is that?
That's right. I mean, it would, you know, the question that was asked earlier about, could we serve downtown with the 42s as it is now? And, you know, Brian was like, I'm not sure we could, given the limited bus stops we have. Sure, the transit center is the place where all the buses come together and sit there so people can go from one to the other, right? So we could still use those bus stops, those improvements wouldn't go away.
Sure. Thank you. Dr. Early.
Yeah, I do, and so a couple things. One, I appreciate the level setting that Director Lauren did with just where we started from in regards to, you know, 2019 and how long we've been at this. I really don't, and I appreciate the public comment around just safety. And it's difficult for me because as much as we, you know, we send the staff to go do more research, we then go explore grant opportunities. I will speak a tiny bit for Yolo County Housing Authority, because what Ian has done a really great job of in the past year that he's been with us is actually pursuing grants that historically, I know he said this was cycle 9, that we've never pursued before. And so I would also just note that we are getting grants that applying for and also getting grants that we've never got before on the Housing Authority. So one, great job. But also that's also probably why it's coming to us, because we haven't pursued these things in the past, and he's new to this position. But I don't want to lose the fact that it's been unsafe, and it's been unsafe for 5 years, right? And it was probably unsafe before that, by the way. We just started actually taking it up in earnest, it sounds like 5 years ago. And so I hesitate to then add another 5-10 years on top of a deteriorating situation, because it's not as if it's gonna get more safe, short of someone doing something. And therefore people will just write it less, because that's right. I mean, I'm not gonna put my safety, my children's safety on the line as local government is getting their stuff together. So what we have before us really is challenging. And so just the last thing I would say on that is I would love an opportunity to be able to pursue both the grant dollars that are here before us, as well as not leave potentially this regional transit center idea like by the wayside. And so that would just be where I'm at.
Thank you, Director Early. Other comments from colleagues?
Just because I spoke up earlier, I was Charlie, trying to get the grant in on time, maybe there's two sets of analysis, one with, one without, that would keep you on track. Safety, moving out of the current location as soon as possible, and then long-term figuring out what is that hopeful downtown location. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so a couple of comments on my end. I think, can you go back to, I think maybe 2 slides, the picture of with the star where this other location is? Might take a little bit to get there. Yeah.
Figuratively and literally.
Yeah, there it is. So just as kind of thrown out, I know we're kind of, this has been a great conversation. I don't support the staff recommendation to pursue looking at that location. I mean, quite literally, that is in the middle of nowhere if you look at it. I think when I came onto this board, this conversation had been going, had already started. I came on in 2022, so yeah, it'd been going on for 3 years. And it's been a long-standing objective of this board to get a location downtown, right? I mean, that's one thing that we've seen, and it's in the staff report of like these different locations that are downtown. What does that look like, right? And why we've gone through this process. So just in terms of kind of throwing out there where I'm at on this, I do not support having that out there. I think it's extremely important for us to continue to look at and work with the city of Woodland and the elected officials in Woodland, their staff and supervisors, to try and figure out what the solution is. That being said, I don't know if there's a number of things that we can look through that are maybe, how do we get out of County Fair Mall as quickly as possible? And still have the level of feedback and engagement with the community that City Manager Hyatt has been talking about. I mean, are there safety improvements that have to be made? Does all of that $1.2 million have to be spent? All those improvements have to be made before we can even look at doing that, right? Like, what is the time? So that's part of it for me, is like, what are the must-haves? What must we do in order to get that transit center going? If it lands that way with their council and with folks, it comes back and say, yeah, we are now all in support of having this happen here. As I said earlier, I would find it extremely difficult to move forward or move away from this, but also move forward with anything in a jurisdiction. We're all up here representing the county as a whole, the region as a whole, but there's a lot of deference given, right? And I would be beside myself if something moved forward in a way where I didn't feel like it was vetted in my community or even with me as a council member. So I think it's extremely important that we do that. But that being said, how do we bridge the gap between doing that outreach, doing that work, and getting out of County Fair Mall, right? And I don't know the answer to that. We've talked about it for a long time. And I think that's the crux of the issue, right? There's no one here saying we need to stay at County Fair Mall. There are 4% of the people, but I think Charter earlier said they maybe didn't understand the question. Like, who's saying, yeah, let's stay here, So I mean, nobody's saying that, right? And so we know and understand that has to happen. And I think for me, the path to that isn't clear in terms of the urgency to get us out, right? So I think finding a way for us to work with this. One thing that we've done, and not that it's a one size fits all, but what we've done in Davis, one of the biggest examples that we had was 14th, East 14th and Oak by the high school. I can't remember if you were there, Brian, or not. You probably remember. Look at his face. Where there were proposed solutions to allow the traffic issues happening in that area, especially around peak times around school. And we ran pilot programs, right? And we blocked off lanes and we did all this work. And lo and behold, I still can't look at it.
I wouldn't raise that one as an example.
Yeah. But my point was,
They were engaged.
they were engaged and it was piloted, right? And it was like, no, we can't, people were able to physically and actively see what those improvements were going to be. It may not have gone the way that certain, obviously, people wanted to go, or different advocates of different communities in our community, right? But it did provide this opportunity for people to experience and interact with what those changes were going to be. I understand that's a long process, right? I would think that it would be, and with the time and the money to do that, does that need to happen before we even move something down there? I mean, those are all the answers to questions I think that are important for me to have to move it forward. I do think that working with Ian and his team on the Yolano Donnelly piece is extremely important. I think it's important, for us to recognize that, 10 years is not short term, right? I mean, we need to do something that is I would say, as somebody sitting up here in the downtown, that benefits the city of Woodland, but we have their buying, their partnership on it. And that if Yolano Donnelly happens, we then still have an improved location for people to access the downtown, right? And to shop and to dine and to work and do whatever they need to do, that doesn't just go away, right? It's an added benefit to not just the circuit and the work that we're doing route wise, but it's an added benefit to the folks that live in the city of Woodland, right? And I'm talking about ADA compliancy, right? Safety on streets, we're seeing increase in people being hit by cars. I mean, all these different things that we know are happening and people become more distracted, but those are all benefits to the city in and of itself, right? That I don't know if some people are like, no, I don't want you to improve my downtown just from a structure standpoint, infrastructure standpoint, right? So I think that's important. And I also, as an elected official, not to say, but would love to be able to meet with folks in Woodland who are city council members there and meet with city manager Hyatt and just do a deeper dive into what some of those concerns are.
Okay.
And meet with Supervisor Barajas and Supervisor Sandy and just have those conversations. Not that that's outweighs the 2x2s that happened. I know Councilmember Fernandez has now moved off. It seems like Moreno is coming in, and I think he was at that meeting, but not as a council member, right? So I just think that there's more work that can be done on my end as a board member and as elected official to feel comfortable to move something forward. And, but again, that being said, I can't, I think all of us, we're all hearing this under, the stress enough the importance of this needing to happen quickly to get us out of Yolo County, out of that mall, right? And I know we all know that. And I don't think at all that the recommendation here and move out there is the right short-term solution, if you will. So that's where I'm at. I don't remember what your yeah, so I'm gonna turn to Director Warren because you had a motion.
Yeah, I do not support the resolution 2024-29. And it was, mine was to postpone item 6. But to further discuss requirements for downtown and the costs, feasibility, and then to come back with resolution 2024-30 at the first meeting in January, which would also allow the CAC to weigh in. That was my motion.
I'll second the motion just so like we can have the conversation around that. A clarifying question, are you proposing just to delay the whole item? So the 29, which is related to the transit center, and the 30, which is the Yolano Donnelly housing site?
I think there's 2 emergencies that I'm coupling, and one is that I want us to pursue downtown. I think that's the best for the community. It would be, if I lived here, it'd be the best for my community. And I think that we need more time to find out what's required for the competitiveness of this grant. And so I was supporting postponing it.
Okay. Do you have a comment?
I don't think it would be a friendly amendment, but one of the suggestions made, was that potentially we could have the both analysis happen, in which it would be, analysis for the application of Yolano Donnelly as both a transit hub and then like an AB, and also it just not as the transit hub, but transit center, but as an augmented transit location, right? So gets back to the question I think we were both asking, which is like, how much transit does it need to be in there in order for it to be competitive? Understanding that a transit center is like, gold star, platinum star, but is there a gold star in which downtown we still meet the regional needs? Was the question, because would hate to miss out potentially on 15 million. And so could we do that analysis? And I don't know how much it would cost to do like an A/B analysis or how much in your time. So I'm recognizing that might not be feasible.
So thank you for that. I think it's certainly something that we could work with the technical team to look at. What are the different levels of transit investment that we could make, and how would those impact the competitiveness of the application? I think that's something we could look at, Brian. He's been much more involved in these conversations than I have. So I want to say yes, but I also don't want him to kick me under the table.
Yeah, I think that most of the greenhouse gas emissions reductions are going to be, and correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, are going to be related to actually the, the changing of the routing that we would do to bring our local routes and the 42 A and B to the site. And then we felt like the transit center component was the best way to facilitate that rerouting, given these other objectives we have and the need for a long term, that it made sense to do that. I'm not seeing what a downside is, would be to seeking the funds from the ASIC program to cover those costs, in which case we have all of our needs met and not just.
Technically, not all of our needs would be met, because I actually think what we've said, and I'm just going again by my four people, not four fathers, four people. Would be, that downtown actually would best meet the transit center needs of the region. And that was the response you heard, right, to Ian, one of my favorites. But was that I don't want us to sculpt this based on being most competitive instead of what the community, including the regional community, actually needs.
I hear what you're saying, I'm understanding where you're getting at. Potentially, we could, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but potentially some of that investment that otherwise would go into Yolo Donnelly could potentially go into a downtown transit center, because it's within that 1 mile proximity of.
Look at us writing a grant together. You can see that?
But, I mean, you know, our concerns are, what does that process look like? Can we get from here to there in the time that we have left? I don't.
Well, so that was actually the question when I said friendly, or I don't even know if this technically would count as friendly amendment. Could you all do that analysis, right? So I'm asking, would that be possible for you to do an AB for this application?
I think so. Don't kick me. I will say, I do think if we're gonna make it a more complicated, analysis that's got multi-parts, all the more reason that we can't delay it.
Well, I know, but that was
And so-
hence the friendly amendment. I don't wanna ask for an amendment that you then say to me like, thanks, but I can't do AB. So that's actually why I was asking, could
Yeah.
we make it both?
We could do it from an analysis standpoint. What we would be doing essentially though, I think, is, you know, putting the city in that same time crunch for, for locating a long-term transit center in the downtown. And I don't,
Again, we've been working for 5 years on the location that we have.
Can you, you guys wanna weigh in on this? I mean, sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah, no, you're good. Welcome back.
What's the question?
I think the question is it desirable for us to look at both an option, the option that we brought before the board tonight, but also a scaled back option for the Yolo Donnelly that maintains the transit center at a downtown location and just looks at making a souped up transit stop for Yolo Donnelly, for lack of a better term. Is that an option that the city would support? Or an analysis that the city would support? I don't.
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I don't know, it would be, yeah, I mean, it would be an analysis, right? I mean, because what's the motion before us, right, is to move to have this, both staff recommendations are delayed or moved for more, another month or so, which we heard earlier impacts the application
Makes
that you're
it absolutely impossible.
to do the work, right?
I don't know.
So then the Director Early's question is, is it useful to look at an option, right, where what's presented here is a full transit center at Yolo Donnelly, free from saying this, put words in your mouth, please.
I appreciate
Kick
it.
me.
No,
And then the other piece was, can we look at if it was moved forward where there was the downtown location was the transit hub? Would you be supportive of us looking into the Yolo Donnelly location being kind of a lesser of a transit hub, but maybe still in that same ballpark?
Yeah, on behalf of the city, absolutely think it's appropriate, if not preferred, right, to put all those options on the table, see what's best, not just for the regional transit ridership, but also for the project to position it competitively. So let's put it all on the table and see if we can collectively in the next 6 weeks perform that analysis, bring it back to you guys to make an informed decision. Can I just address we've been at this for 5 years. So
Yes, please.
we had a different executive director 5 years ago. We were looking at a different analysis 5 years ago. So fast forward, we have a new executive director who has a totally different model, which makes a lot more sense moving forward for how transit gets accommodated. So I think we've been looking at a totally different concept over the last 2.5 years. So I don't want to beat ourselves up that we've been doing this forever and we've got nowhere, and there was COVID in there.
Yeah, that was a global pandemic. So that changed how people.
It's, yeah.
And again, only because, I mean, I'm new-ish, I'm not new anymore on this board, but I have to admit, if I knew as a city council member of my city that I had serious safety concerns with my current transit center, I would have a sense of urgency, and so I am curious, because it continues to escalate, right? The safety issues at our particular transit center. Are the council members aware of how bad it's gotten?
They are, and I would argue they're not standing in the way. We're not slowing down the process necessarily. We want to make sure that we move in an informed fashion to a new location, right, that has its own safety concerns, which we've asked for improvements to be included. That's where the escalation of cost came from. But we have made improvements over the last 6 months at the County Fair Mall. It was actually a lot worse than it is today, but
You know,
if you can imagine,
right?
if you can imagine. But absolutely, there's not a single council member that says, we want to keep the transit center where it's at as long as we can, right?
Okay, could we, and I know we're not gonna get that tonight, but I think, and I'm also gonna be chair now, you heard the vote. I would love to make this, whether I need to also go and have a meeting of the minds with your council members and some others of us to figure out what exactly is it gonna take to move us from even 2.5, 3 years, right, instead of 5, to this next year, right? Like, how do we move this forward so that, because I too care about the whole region. Woodland is my community as well. I'm not a city council member, but I serve this community, and so would want to make sure that if we know there are serious safety concerns, even if they've improved over what has happened in the past 6 months, that we really make this an urgent priority. Yeah.
Happy to.
Yeah.
Welcome that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the table, motion by Director Warren. Are you offering any sort of
Is
amendment?
that a friendly amendment? I don't.
I'm gonna turn to Kimberly.
Yeah,
Well, I think it's friendly if Director Lawrence is
Right.
able to
Okay.
accepting the amendment, but I'm not sure if that's.
Director Warren.
So would the addition be to continue analysis of the application for the Transit Hub Center at Yolo Donnelly? I think I said it wrong. And to expedite movement to Third and Court.
So the friendly amendment was to do a two-pronged analysis. One of what you proposed, and then adding an analysis that would make the transit center downtown that we have been working towards. What would that be for this application? Would that be competitive enough to actually move the application forward?
So I think what I'm hearing is that we would, I think it sounds like we'd be deferring on the first part of the recommended action. We're focusing on the second piece, which is the Yolo County Housing Grant and supporting that grant, right, for Yolanda Donnelly. And so then the question would be, is there support for that resolution, which would be amended to take out, to not just focus on a transit center, and maybe we just revise to say, or other transit options. Is what I'm hearing is the friendly amendment, because the downtown option isn't part of that. That's this resolution, if I'm understanding correctly, doesn't slow any of that downtown piece down.
Yeah, but I want specificity because
Okay.
it's needed. And so what I would be saying is that the friendly amendment would include the analysis that staff has suggested for the application, and a second analysis that takes into account the downtown location, and that being the transit hub as part of this application, right? Because as we said, it technically is within the distance that it could be the transit center with a souped up version, as you said, for
Would it be easier if we called a vote on the current motion that's on the table? I mean, because what the motion on the table is to delay,
Everything.
right?
We could certainly, yes, if that's.
I mean, is that, I'm just,
You want me to do that?
Director Warren,
I would accept not delaying everything, but including a two-prong analysis of the court and third and Yolo, Yolano Donnelly. But I'm not supporting approving the resolution until that comes back. I'm
Oh, I
interested
see,
in
because
looking
there's
into
parts
it,
in here. Okay,
but
I see
I'm
what you're
not
saying.
supporting approving that. I'm not voting to approve that. I want it to come back
I see what you're
with
saying.
analysis. That's what I'm asking.
Because, okay, so I think I understand what Director Lauren is saying, because you have a firm intent to partner on application, conditional on MOU with city, collaborate, and so, yeah.
but it coming, not approving it tonight, right? In effect, delay makes it so that project can't go forward, right?
So this,
Proving the analysis, not the
this motion does not,
partner.
this is not directing staff to sign the MOU, so it would have to come back to you anyway.
Right.
It would have to come back to you anyway, because this says that we should work to develop an MOU.
Oh.
All right, that needs to come back. That's what, that step A is,
It's two.
is to signal the intent and to say we need an MOU, it's conditional on an MOU, so that would have to come back. The second, B, that is the authorizing staff to spend the money, to work with the team and spend the money to do the technical analysis.
And I'm just augmenting the technical analysis. Right.
Right.
I'm not sure yet.
Director Dawes.
My bad.
There'll be a slight detour, but I think it'll crystallize the thinking. The option A, option B, as I first said it casually, I think what it is, the routing of the three lines, the 42, the 215, and 211. In both cases, would go to downtown and to
Yolano Donnelly.
Yolano Donnelly. It's just, if one of those analysis, maybe option A, the transit center is downtown where the interlining and the staging of the buses takes place. And the other option, it happens at Yolo Donnelly. So if that helps, it's both sites would get full access, because you would route all three lines to that same. So the GHG analysis might be nearly the same. It's really just where the interlining takes place.
Yeah, I think that's right, because that is, the ultimate goal is to route inner city buses into the downtown. We don't have an operational need for buses to dwell and have those transfers occur in the downtown, especially knowing that all of those routes would ultimately serve the downtown. So from our standpoint, we'd rather have buses dwelling at Yolano Donnelly. We're okay with that, it works for us.
But as a rider, I would want most of the transfers that happen to be happening where the gravity of that analysis of those transfers happens the most. I wouldn't want to have to take a second line to get to the transfer. Yeah, so if most of the trips, and we're really the weeds here, are at the court or downtown and not at the housing site, I want the transfers to happen at the downtown location. But, and I wanted to say that because I'm saying that option B should not just be putting the 42 to get the 30-minute headways, it should try to include all three lines, the 211, the 215, and the 42 at Yolano Donnelly. Because that really is getting more service to that new development, is having all three lines serve that development, not just the 42. So it's less diluted if all three lines serve that. Trying to help us.
Okay. Kimberly, do you have, I'm gonna turn to you to see what you have over there.
What do I have over here? So I think, it sounds like where we're landing is, well, potentially. Either we proceed with the motion, which is to simply defer the action on defer item 6 to January. The potential alternative to that is to table the first part of the action regarding the Gateway Center turn to the resolution regarding the Yolo County Housing support for their Yolanda Donnelly project. And the resolution, which as Director Bernstein noted, is intended to be open-ended, right? To continue that negotiation and allow that process to start. So if you allowed us to proceed with the resolution, it's not, what I'm hearing is just simply making some changes to that resolution, which would just open it up so it's not confined to transit center at Yolanda Donnelly, that it's transit options serving downtown and Yolanda Donnelly. So it may just be some slight modifications to that resolution.
the reason why I'm being as specific, is that it's not just like some transit center downtown.
Right.
That's why I'm being that specific,
Well,
right?
And the resolution was, what doesn't preclude, we'd still have to return to this board with an MOU for approval.
Right, but they would have already done the analysis, so I don't want like you to go forth and be like, so we considered several different transit options for
We don't
this.
have time.
Yeah, I agree. So that's, I'm just like, I wanna be super specific, so you're like, no, the resolution was this, so this is the work we're gonna do.
So I think I'm hearing that it would get, the motion is to approve 2024-30, but with the modifications to B, which is that it would be a B1, which is the full transit center at Yolanda Donnelly, and a B2, which is a souped up, maybe we don't put souped up in the resolution, but souped up transit stop at Yolanda Donnelly that's served by intercity buses, and a full transit center at Court and Second.
Enhanced.
Enhanced. There you go.
Oh,
Does that sound right?
Dr. Moore, are you?
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. So part of the reason that I don't feel like I have any public input on, representing moving to Yolanda, I'm gonna say it wrong, Donley. But we do have public input on moving downtown. We do have support, and that's what we've pursued. Just kind of pivoting, without having the CAC hearing from the community action committee and not knowing so many things, I'm not comfortable.
So, thank you for clarifying, and I want to make sure I'm understanding, so I am fully supportive of continuing and really moving strongly ahead with the location in downtown Woodland, right? The one that we're talking about here. In my mind's eye, that comes back to us, we're moving that forward, working closely with the city of Woodland and their partners, their council members, the supervisors, staff, whoever that is, to get a solution on the table to move out of County Fair Mall and into downtown, whatever negotiations need to happen to figure out if we can get there, right? We can't do anything, and not that we would, again, I'm not implying that, without the support of the city of Woodland, right? We can't move that transit hub into downtown unless we have a partnership and agreement with you that that's what we want to see happen. So I look at it like, I don't think it's an either or, but I look at this and think that we're full steam ahead, and if that needs to be a resolution, I actually do want to vote on the first one. And make it clear that we're not pursuing that, and then would also make a motion that we need to do. I'll make that motion later around that downtown location and how we can move towards that. So I don't see him, I fall in this, I'm kind of on the side of not seeing it as an either or, that we're not abandoning kind of this desire to be downtown. That really what this is we, across the board, as a region, as a state, know the impact of the lack of affordable housing. And I think for me personally, they're not disconnected, right? It's not, we want people living in our downtowns, shopping, dining. We want people of all socioeconomic classes to be able to do that. I think that a project that's exciting as Yolanda Donnelly, that the SACOG board has put priority behind, the city of Woodland's put priority behind, is of extreme importance, not just to us as a region of the city of Woodland, but the folks who don't have the ability to have a roof over their head, right? Or be able to have housing. So I want to see that move forward, but again, want to make sure that our focus is on getting that downtown location done and moved, because 10 years from now, if Yolo Donnelly even happens, right, we're presuming that they're going to get the $15 million grant. I hope that you do, I really do, but I want to see that move forward at the same time. So I think we're at a point, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I was gonna say,
Sure.
okay.
I have a clarifying question. Could we have a substitute motion to authorize staff to pursue, third and court and have that as a single motion and then come back to the, other item.
Yeah, so my intent was, I think we, I think when, our little council was kind of wrapping up what she was hearing. I do want to take a vote on staff recommendation 1, and then intend to make a substitute motion to really put behind, the importance here of the second or third and fourth.
Okay, I
Is
withdraw.
that, yeah, that way, I'd like to have
I was gonna
it.
say, maybe if Director Lawrence amenable to withdrawing both motions, just to allow
Yes.
an alternative to the first, to address the first.
Trying to get
so
there.
I want to just
feel
stand on
accomplished
it.
if
I
that-
got it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I think that we are,
All right.
You can call for motion on the first one. If there's no motion, then it dies for lack of.
sure,
Right.
yeah. All right, so, let's deal with, staff recommendation number 1. I'll return to my colleagues. Do any of my colleagues have, a motion or on staff recommendation number 1?
Oh, I would motion to, not pass.
You don't have to make a motion.
Yeah.
and if you're,
Just
if
you're good.
that's.
Yep.
Oh, thank God. Okay.
So there's no motion on that.
Right.
Yep, staff recommendation, number 1, to pursue, feasibility analysis for the Gateway Costco Shopping Center. Like my attorney dies, with no support
action.
from no action from my colleagues up here this evening. I'm gonna turn to, sure,
If I could just make one subtle suggestion, and that is to somewhere in this, without complicating the motion, include authorizing staff to, in addition to completing the analysis for the Second and Court Street, also complete analysis for the Sixth Street alternative. And I do that only, and
No. Oh, I'm sorry, just came out.
well, what I'm trying to do is not make it feel like the council has no choice. This is the only option for downtown, right? And I think, there's simple optics here that, if the board is willing to say, hey, look, city, we hear you, the Sixth Street option is one that you're interested in vetting. We vet that out, and if it proves to not be as, cost effective and timely and safe and preferred, that's fine. But I'm fearful that if we say, look, this option here at Second Street is the only option, the city council is gonna feel like, they've been put in a box, so.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. So I think let's move on to when we come back to the Second and Court Street. Let's deal with, staff recommendation number 2, where we have a motion on the table and a second and the amendments that were made, correct?
Yes, so just to clarify, it's not about the downtown, it's about the Yolo Donald.
Right, yeah,
It's
number 2.
not
Yeah.
Court Street.
Nope, number 2, staff recommendation. Okay, so you have everything written down that was, we have the motion, substitute motion, in the friendly amendment.
Well, I think we had withdrawn those, so I think we need a new motion on the second one, which is whether adoption of the resolution with the modifications, which is, I think, where you were headed.
Yeah.
And then it would be just the Woodland Transit Center, but other transit options for downtown and Yolo Donnelly.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would respectfully suggest that, my motion is recognizing that it is not the only option. We nevertheless endorse the grant application of the Yolo Donald, Delano Circle Hill Housing Authority grant and commit to providing sufficient research assistance to assist them in preparing a viable application.
Yes, we can revise the resolution to say that.
I'm
I
gonna
would say
specify.
from
Let's-
staff's perspective.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well,
For a
let's
second.
get, there's a motion on the table, so let's get a second, right, and then we can have the conversation. Is there a second on the table for Director Stallworth's motion? I'll second it. Director Bernstein.
I think it's an elegant and straightforward motion. I think ours is much more wordy and cumbersome, but for a reason. And that goes back to the issue that we had raised around routing, and making sure that we need an MOU with the city. What we don't want to do is commit to something and say we're going to do it as part of the grant application, and then we can't figure out and we can't reach accommodation with the city about the routing.
So you do not want to get an endorsement at this point.
That's why we want to negotiate the MOU and bring it back to you.
Right.
Because we want it to be contingent upon that MOU, so that we know that we can actually route our buses to and from whatever this location is.
Absolutely no problem with that. It's already stated, incorporate that language in what I've stated.
Hey, only because I've now had enough experience, here, so. To be clear, because it was a very eloquent way of stating it, but lack of specificity in the court, second court location, it just said explore other options. Do you need that specificity, or are you very clear on what, cause I would hate to like next month come and it'd be like, well, you actually said explore all transit opportunities, and then I'm disappointed with what I have in front of me.
From staff's perspective, there is not another location in downtown Woodland that meets our operational constraints as well as the city's constraints.
Okay, so that's, then I'm more than happy to support that.
Kimberly?
Question.
Well, I think I was. Yes, so I think what I'm hearing is we're not amending to add additional pieces about the additional sites, but just to clarify, the resolution doesn't address the downtown location. Specifically, it's about Yolo and Donnelly and the transit operations there, which would potentially be a transit center. So if you just adopt that resolution, that leaves the downtown option still there and part of what will be discussed with the MOU.
As long as both analysis are done. We've like labored this for a solid 30 minutes, so if there's not clarity, run the tape back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Director Warren.
In Tom's eloquent statement and adding the language of the MOU, could there be a semicolon there and add and continue to direct staff to analyze and, I don't know, move to Third and Fourth Street or whatever, pursue whatever we need to know.
Once you do that, I withdraw the
Then he
motion
withdraws.
because I'm conflicted on the
Yes.
downtown.
So can we, is that something we could?
Can I make that same exact motion,
Yes,
but add
yes.
this? That way Tom doesn't have to.
Yes, Director Salary can withdraw the motion and step down because it's changed a little from what we
Okay.
anticipated,
That's
so.
why I stated it
Yes.
the way I read it.
Okay,
That's what I was gonna ask, if we could have a motion after this motion, if we weren't done yet. That's,
Well, Director Warren, can you just state that motion? I'll second that motion that you just made with the semicolon, and then we're good.
I'm asking to, semicolon, also, pursue, analysis of, Third and Court as, quickly as we can. That's my second.
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 Second in Court, sorry.
Perfect. I second that motion.
Okay,
Here we go.
we have a motion, we have a second. Do we need to read back this motion, or are we good? Are you good? You have what you need?
I think I'm good.
I'm good.
As long as the executive director is good.
We'll watch the tape if we have to, but if you all feel confident, I think I know where we are. So if everybody feels okay, then I think we can go ahead.
Let's do it.
Okay. So we will call a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain.
Abstain.
Motion carries three ayes, 0 nays, and 1 abstain, Director Stallman. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you guys for coming. I'll see you next week.
Midnight supper. I've been there.
All right.
Is it this Wednesday? I'll see you this Wednesday. Select
Okay.
volunteer.
All right, thank you. Thank you to the folks that were here. Thank you to staff. Thank you to my colleagues for that conversation. I really appreciate the depth in which we all went up here and the thoughtfulness you took to move this item forward. We are now on to agenda item number 7, administrative reports. I will turn to any of my board members. Any of my board members have any administrative reports this evening? No. Okay, I will turn to Transdev. Thank you for sticking around. I continue to say, I don't understand why we do these reports at the end, because you're here for 2 hours. It's great having you, and then you talk for like, great updates for 30 seconds, then we're done.
It's been, I thought it was a little less than that, but.
Well,
Oh, thank you. So, recruiting and training continues to be going well. It's putting us in line where we need to be for registration of service in January. It's looking really good. We actually started another class today with 8 participants, 4 which already have their commercial license. So there's less to do in there. So we're looking really good still.
Great.
Thank you. Every month you have such great things about recruitment. I appreciate it. How many people up here? What's that?
Definitely changed after the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Where we were, it's really different.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, as a small business owner, I know the challenges of hiring people and keeping people, and it's not easy. But I appreciate the work that you guys do.
Good.
All right, we're on to 7C, Executive Director Verbal Report. I will turn to Director Bernstein.
Thank you so much. And I will say, this used to be at the beginning of the agenda. We moved it to the end. It can always be moved back at the chair's prerogative.
I'm done, yeah.
So, I will try to keep this short. I do want to share some important updates. Yeah, as you heard from Michael, we are on track for restoring and expanding services in January. So that is moving ahead, and the operations team is very focused on getting that expansion out the door. I did want to flag, one thing that we talked a lot about last month was our upcoming budget workshops. And our incoming chair and vice chair gamely volunteered to meet and talk about that. And so we were not able to do that meeting before tonight. It's now scheduled for for later this week. We'll be meeting to discuss that and bringing that back to you in January with hopefully a revised plan for your approval. We also this week, or this month, kicked off discussions with Fourth and Hope and the city of Woodland regarding options for improving transportation to the East Beamer campus. We'll currently have a survey of staff, volunteers, and residents that is out right now, getting their input on the transportation needs for the campus to better understand what those needs are. And we're on track to bring that to our Citizens Advisory Committee in March and back to this board in April. One other thing I wanted to just highlight for you, for those of you that sit on the SACOG board know that SACOG is changing the way it allocates STIP funding based on a corrective action that was with a federal corrective order, blah, blah, blah. A lot of details on that, but in order to ensure that Yolo County gets our full fair share, we're gonna need to increase coordination amongst our member jurisdictions around that. And so Brian, on top of everything else he's doing, has been leading an effort with all of your city staff to make sure to identify what is the best, most appropriate way for us to coordinate to ensure everyone gets their fair share of those funds. So the TAC is now meeting monthly on that. We anticipate that the SACOG's funding round is going to be in the spring, so we want to bring an action to you, a recommendation around that coordination once our TAC has completed its work. So we look forward to bringing that to you probably in the spring, looking at a March, April timeframe for that. And then lastly, I just wanted to note our Yahtzee Phase 2 outreach is well underway. We've had open houses this month in Yolo, Madison, Winters, Esparto, and Davis. And we've got upcoming open houses in Knights Landing, Woodland, Dunnigan, and West Sacramento and Clarksburg after the holidays. So that concludes my report. And I just want to take a moment myself to thank both Director Chapman for his service as chair during what was a very interesting and challenging year, and appreciate his leadership over the course of this year. And also just want to thank Director Stollard for all of his service to this board, which has been really essential for me and quite what you all said. I want to say at times 1,000. I've learned so much about how to be an executive director just from working with Tom and understanding, and his frankness and his experience has been really helpful in helping me navigate some of the difficult challenges we've had. So we're going to miss you. And I want to thank you.
Back at you. Thank you so much.
And that concludes my report.
I love you all. Well, thank you, Director Bernstein. Director Early has a quick question for you.
I swear it's quick. On the STIP funding, what is the best way to work with you all? Because I appreciate, it's actually kind of like what I said to Woodland City Manager, that you're gonna bring us like a fully formed cake. But we may have thoughts on that, particularly because most of this board sits also on the transportation committee. So we just voted on a portion of this, but not the portion that you all are actually taking up in the TAC. And I just think we might have thoughts on it. So how would you like us to engage? Do you want us to engage with the staff and then they get engaged with you?
Yeah, so we're working at the staff level right now, just to explore the ideas and kind of, because we're talking about not a huge amount of funding. So we're trying to figure out the best way to access the funding, because it's coming by formula by population into the county, then how does that? Well, I won't go there. Let me tell you this.
Well, cause the way it's the way that we saw it this past Thursday was competitive within each of those counties and then pool, right? Like, so that's.
And that's not, so it looks like the TAC is more interested in finding a way for everybody to sort of get their fair share in this first new cycle of formula step funding. The question is, what are the mechanics of making that happen? And that's what we're talking about at the TAC level. And that's why we need to meet monthly, because there's lots of, just like everything, you start to get into details and then you have to.
Well, and so this is actually, and it's not agendized, so I don't wanna go too far into this. I guess my only question is, how would you like to engage this? I have thoughts.
So, real quick. Yes, our expectation is that the local agency staff will need to bring this to their respective councils or board of supervisor to endorse or approve sort of the collective strategy for these STIP funds.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the executive director's verbal report. We will turn to general public comment. Welcome.
Welcome. I'll commend the budget hearing, but I'll raise again with the capital budget that was presented tonight as an update. We don't have units of output, we only have units of cost. And if you don't see units of output, you have no way of knowing where the cost is. It's easy to cut costs, control costs, but you need to put, what's your results from the thing? We need to see that. I know it's a work in progress. Your finance director is here, but let's not forget that. And again, my concern with Yahtzee, that basically only 10% of the county lives in the unincorporated areas, but with all the outreaches to the unincorporated areas. And people live in cities, travel through the unincorporated areas to get from one city to another. And I'm concerned that Yahtzee has lost its focus on moving people, and instead it's a political good trying to service the unincorporated parts of the county. So we need to basically make sure that I'm concerned that the outreach basic biases the results, just like the electoral college biases the results, because it's affirmative action for rural areas. And rural people need affirmative action, but I wonder whether we're overboard on the outskirts, because only 10% of the county lives in the unincorporated areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alan. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for touching and highlighting on the service restoration and expansion coming up and getting ready for that. And the other thing we were, I know, discussing before the meeting, and now the items on the screen, the long range calendar. Again, last week I was at the swearing in of the council members and Mayor Guerrero at West Sacramento. And I just maybe get a clarifying question out. On the long range calendar, is the ballpark matter now in February? Or is that still supposed to be in January, whereas the transit center was the big item tonight? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
So yeah, to the long range calendar, there was an error. It's correct in your packet, but it was incorrect in the slide deck. That service to Settle Health Park for River Cats and A's is in February, not January. But it was left out of the slide. It was renewed youth ride free. So that was a mistake. In terms of what is on the long range calendar for January, we have the plan for the budget workshops. We have appointments to CCJPA and CARTA, which we make every year. We have our short range transit plan update. That's going to be our first update for you. In February, we were opening the public hearing on the service changes for Beeline and Ninth Landing and Winters. The ballpark is on the agenda, although not listed on the slide. Yahtzee, we have some important decisions on Yahtzee coming up, and then also our audited financial statements. In March, I've put a hold for a possible budget workshop, but we also do have a few other items that are on there. So that's something we're going to have to wrestle with, I think, in terms of our long range calendar. There's the SACOG regional funding around STIP coordination. That's what we were just talking about. Possible action on Beeline, and then another short range transit plan update. So that's what's on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Autumn. Any of my colleagues have any item they would like to discuss for our long range calendar? Seeing none, we adjourn.